Welcome to Wonderful Fantasy World. Subscribe now. The Mark of the Two Snakes, The Rebirth of the God Slayer. Volume 1, The Awakening of the Blood Oath. Chapter 13, Blood Oath Blacksmith Shop. The wind in the misty wasteland whipped sand and gravel against the tin roof of the gear outpost. Aiden's fingertips traced the rusty iron door. The signboard on the lintel, Blood Oath Blacksmith Shop, was in a dilapidated state, but the emblem of two snakes entwining a gear could still be discerned. It was the hiding place of his father in the misty wasteland in Chapter 13 of the Prequel, and also the source of the clanging sound of his father hammering gears in his childhood memories. The moment he pushed the door open, the smell of rust and spiritual vein coolant hit his nostrils. In the center of the workbench lay a half-finished gear gauntlet. The metal surface was etched with an unfinished red snake pattern, and the groove on the inner side of the gauntlet was exactly the same shape as the double snake mark on Aiden's chest. His fingers stroked the cold metal, and suddenly, he heard his father's voice in his memory. The cracks in the gears are not defects, but channels for spiritual veins to flow through. This was his father's catchphrase when forging hidden spiritual vein equipment for aliens in Chapter 13 of the Prequel. Aiden, look at this. Lily suddenly pulled out a leather-bound diary from the hidden compartment of the workbench. On the inner side of the cover was pasted a half sheet of yellowed letter paper, exactly the remaining pages of the research log of the Mark of the Two Snakes, stolen by his parents in Chapter 11 of the Prequel. The diary began with his father's handwriting. At the age of 17, my mother first let me touch the leaves of the petrified ancient tree, and I saw Lauren's mechanical heart. That is the weakness of the core of the divine throne. When he turned to the last page, Aiden's breath suddenly caught. On the yellowed paper next to the double snake gear disassembly diagram was his father's blood handprint, pressed on the words, "Aiden, your choice will end the cycle." Next to it was stuck a half photo. His mother, wearing a snake scale armor, stood in front of the ancient tree. The arrangement of the scales on the armor was exactly the same as the sacred object given by Vera before she was petrified in Chapter 9 of the Prequel, proving that she was the direct vessel of Vera's spiritual veins. Is this ... mother? Aiden's fingertips traced the snake scale pattern of his mother in the photo. He suddenly remembered that on the gallows square in Chapter 3, the gear pattern on the mechanical wrist of the church bishop was exactly the same as the arrangement of these scales, a characteristic of Lauren's mechanical transformation in the previous Divine Throne experiment. Lily leaned closer to the photo and suddenly exclaimed, "Her pupils are vertical red snake pupils, exactly the same as Mara's snake tribe bloodline." In the hidden compartment under the workbench, 7 gear war puppets stood quietly, each engraved with the family emblem, Blood of It, on the chest. When Aiden touched the core of one of them, a projection of his father suddenly emerged, and his voice was mixed with mechanical noise. The joint lubricant of these war puppets is mixed with Vera's spiritual vein blood, which can temporarily freeze the rotation frequency of the gears of the Divine Throne, just as she did in the Battle of the Two Snakes 100 years ago. In the image, the gear joints of the war puppet flickered with red snake spiritual light, exactly the same as Vera's spiritual vein sword technique in Chapter 5 of the Prequel. Suddenly, a rumble of turning gears came from the ground. Aiden lifted the floor, revealing a gear staircase leading to the underground chamber. Each step was engraved with the dates of the previous Divine Throne experiment, from Year 1 of Eternal Silence, when the Eternal Silence disaster broke out, to Year 3 of Blood Oath, when his father disappeared. On the stone platform in the center of the chamber, a set of snake scale armor lay quietly. The sunken double snake mark in the center of the breastplate could exactly fit Aiden's jade pendant. "This is Vera's relic." The voice of the remnant soul Vera sounded in the jade pendant, with a rare tremor. "When I injected my spiritual veins into a human body back then, the first successful vessel was your mother." Aiden's temples throbbed. He finally understood why his mother could use spiritual veins to forge alien characteristics on the execution rack. It was simply the embodiment of Vera's spiritual veins. Lily's scanner suddenly beeped, pointing to the ciphertext inside the armor. Lauren's mechanical heart is hidden in the No 12 hub of the gear corridor in the Divine Palace, and the password to activate it is your mother's heartbeat frequency. Aiden remembered what old Tom had said before his death in Chapter 2. It's related to Lauren's mechanical heart ... double quotes. now was finally confirmed in his father's blacksmith shop. The gear furnace in the corner caught Aiden's attention. The furnace wall was engraved with the names of numerous aliens, exactly the snake tribe warriors petrified by the siphon cannon in the Blood Fire Siege in Chapter 4 of the prequel. His father's note by the furnace read, "Every gear remembers the harvested spiritual veins, just as Aiden's blood-red eyes remember the flames of his mother." This sentence formed a loop with the scene in Chapter 1 when Aiden first awakened his blood-red eyes as his mother was being burned. When he placed his palm in the center of the furnace, the gears suddenly resonated, showing fragments of the previous Divine Throne experiment. Before the collapse of the Eternal Silence Core, Lauren bound Vera's spiritual vein crystal to his mechanical heart, and in the background, his father's figure was stuffing the double snake jade pendant into the swaddled Aiden. "We mistook the gears for gods." Lauren's voice was mixed with the sound of gear friction. "But you can make them a bridge of symbiosis." "So you knew it all along?" Aiden whispered to the air, suddenly understanding why his father had hidden the truth about the bloodline. Just as in Chapter 13 of the prequel, when his father engraved the double snake pattern on the workbench, he deliberately made the sound of the gears knocking in sync with his mother's heartbeat, so that Aiden would naturally accept the existence of the mark of the two snakes as he grew up. Lily suddenly pointed to the groove at the bottom of the furnace. "The double snake jade pendant can be put here." After a moment of hesitation, Aiden pressed the jade pendant into the groove, and the blood-colored spiritual light instantly spread throughout the chamber. A projection of his father's memory emerged on the wall. When the church pursuers surrounded the outpost, his father stuffed the pocket watch map into Aiden's hands and then turned around to activate the self-destruction program of the war puppet. In the light of the gear explosion, the look in his eyes as he looked at Aiden for the last time was full of relief. He voluntarily became the energy anchor point of the Divine Throne. The remnant soul of Vera appeared, her fingers stroking the double snake totem on the wall. "Just as I bound the core of the Divine Throne with Lauren 100 years ago, your father used his life to buy you 10 years of growth time." Aiden's gaze fell on his father's work apron. Under the cloth covered with oil stains, a blood-colored spell text, similar to that when Vera was petrified in Chapter 9 of the prequel, could be faintly seen. In the innermost safe, Aiden found his mother's diary. Among the yellowed pages was the remaining pages of the church log stolen by his parents in Chapter 11 of the prequel. Lauren's note read, "The blood of the two snakes must go through the triple tempering of anger, doubt, symbiosis, and none can be missing." His mother annotated beside it, "But don't let him become a vessel. Let him be himself." When Lily was adjusting the furnace, the gears suddenly turned in reverse, revealing a gear compass in the interlayer, similar to the prototype of the spiritual vein compass that will appear in Volume 7. The double snake pointer in the center was pointing in the direction of the mechanical divine palace. Aiden's blood-red eyes suddenly activated, and he saw 3 gear cracks emerging on the surface of the compass, corresponding to his choices of saving the alien youth in Chapter 1, rejecting the church's Joan in Chapter 3, and standing in the blacksmith shop at this moment. "We should go." Aiden put the snake scale armor into his backpack. The engravings inside the armor resonated with his double snake mark, showing Vera's sword marks from the confrontation of the two snakes in Chapter 5 of the prequel. The remaining pages of his father's diary fluttered in the wind, and the last line of words stabbed his eyes. "The third weakness of the core of the Divine Throne is the Church's paranoia about pure humans, just like when they burned your mother back then." Before leaving, Aiden engraved a new double snake totem on the workbench. With one more crack than the pattern left by his father, the mark he left when he broke the gear on the gallows square in Chapter 3. The mist poured in through the broken window lattice, intertwining the clanging sound of the blacksmith shop with the rustling sound of the branches and leaves of the petrified ancient tree in the distance, as if the gears of 2 eras finally began to rotate at the same frequency. When they set foot on the road to the Divine Palace, the pointer of the pocket watch suddenly spun wildly, and the gear frequency was completely consistent with the resonance deep in the furnace. Aiden knew that his father's blacksmith shop was not only a shelter, but also a transfer station for the previous Divine Throne experiment. Every gear forged here was engraved with an oath against fate. Every drop of blood flowing here was telling the true meaning of the mark of the two snakes. Not a curse, bound shackle, but a key to choice. Blood and gears indispensable, Aiden muttered to himself, tightly gripping the snake-shaped wrench left by his father. The double snake pattern on the handle of the wrench glimmered faintly in the mist, echoing the unfinished gear gauntlet on the workbench. He finally understood that what his father engraved was not a creed but a century-spanning promise. When the gears and blood combined in his hands, the gears that would break the cycle had just begun to turn. In the distance, the blood-colored leaves of the petrified ancient tree fell with the wind, forming a pattern of two snakes entwining on the ruins of the blacksmith shop. Aiden knew that this was not only his father's hiding place, but also the birthplace of the concept of the two snakes. Lauren's gear rationality and Vera's spiritual vein symbiosis finally condensed into the beating double snake mark on his chest through his father's hammer and his mother's blood. And now, it was his turn to carry these broken gear memories, enter the church's mechanical divine palace, and personally question the truth of the core of the divine throne. The iron door of the gear outpost closed behind them, and Aiden didn't look back. He knew that in the hidden compartment of his father's workbench, there was still an unsent letter. Inside his mother's snake-scale armor, there was still Vera's symbiosis spell engraved. And in the groove at the bottom of the furnace, the double snake jade pendant was accumulating new spiritual light. These fragments from different times and spaces would eventually be pieced together into a complete truth in his blood. Red eyes, about the divine throne, about the church, and about the woman who turned around on the execution rack, whether she was his mother or the last vessel chosen by Vera. The mist thickened. Aiden touched the mark on his chest, and the voice of the remnant soul Vera sounded again. Your father once said that the turning sound of the gears was like your mother's heartbeat. Now listen. In the distance, a regular gear roar came from the direction of the divine palace, gradually synchronizing with Aiden's heartbeat. He suddenly understood that it was not the call of the divine throne, but the aftermath of the battle of the two snakes 100 years ago, waiting in his blood vessels for the final turn of choice. This episode ends here. The next episode will be more exciting. Subscribe now.